All right. Welcome everybody as we fill on in and I move some junk off of my desk. All right. We have a full room of people coming in today. So I started it just a second early so that we have time for everybody to get in and cover all the boring stuff before we officially start the presentation in 1 minute. So feel free to let us know where you're coming from. And one question I know I would love to have for the benefit of these ladies is what stage you are in the writing or editing process. And if you've ever used the tools Fictionary or ProWritingAid or not. And if you are looking for a live editor as well. So those are kind of the three questions. We'll be going over the different stages of editing from story arc all the way through working with a live editor to the final product and everything in between. So we are excited. We have 1 more minute here. I never start early, so this is kind of weird. I'm used to just going right into it, but this will make sure we don't have any kinks when we are ready to go live. And we're going to go ahead and kick this on live on Facebook too. So here's the deal. It's going to be a full room today. So if by any chance you get kicked out or leave and can't get back in, go on over to the Women in Publishing Summit Facebook page where you can join us live as well. And we'll have somebody over there checking the chat if you have questions. But it is 1 o'clock now. So we are going to go ahead and get started. So I love doing this webinar each year. This is our second year doing it. So it's not like we've done it for 100 years or anything, but it's a fun webinar because we really get into the whole process of starting with your finished draft, your manuscript, and all the things that you need to do. And last year when we started this, so I'll introduce our panelists quickly. I'm not going to read their bios because I was explaining to them before I made a big mistake of having an eye appointment this morning. I thought I gave myself enough time, but my eyes are still fully dilated. So I'm having a difficult time reading. So I've got Nancy here to help with questions and all of that kind of stuff. But we've got Kristina from Fictionary, we have Lisa from ProWritingAid, and we have JoEllen from FirstEditing. And all three of these are major and important pieces in your editing process. And last year when we did this, as Kristina was telling us about her tool, her AI tool, Fictionary, was really excited about it because I had just started writing my first novel. And I'm really thrilled to say that I finished it about a month ago and I ran it through Fictionary, and we can all be excited with me that my story matches the arc that is supposed to. My inciting incident's a couple scenes later than you suggest, but it's not like insanely different. So I was very happy to see that. And you know, you're going to talk about your tool in depth, but just from the user perspective, I want to say I thought it was really cool because you go through this tool and it asks you a lot of questions on each chapter and each scene so that you make sure that you're covering the things that you may not know as a new novelist that you need to be covering. And I can tell you that I completely wrote my first chapter after just going through all of the boxes and checks of, you know, just filling out the information in Fictionary and thinking about the things and watching a couple of the videos that you and JoEllen do. Completely rewrote my first chapter and plan on doing that all the way through. And it's made such a big difference. And then I took that first chapter and I put it into ProWritingAid, which is a self-editing tool. And I'm very happy to announce that my writing is currently at a 4th grade level. So so I may have some work to do on that, but I guess the average is 4th to 7th grade reading level is what you're aiming for, I think.
Yeah, so 4th grade level doesn't mean you're writing for kids. It just means it's easy. It's easy for everyone to take in. Don't panic. That's good.
It's good because it's a nice, easy read. So if you're not looking to work your brain, you just want a nice little romance, we're good to go. But again, it identified words that I used way too many times or structures, grammatical errors that I'd missed or other things. So just another tool to help you really clean things up before you then move to JoEllen's part, which is working with a real editor who can make sure that all the things are correct and lots of different types of editing, which she's going to talk about. So, you know, I have learned that writing a fiction book is a completely different ballgame than writing a nonfiction book. And these tools have been incredibly helpful for me as a first-time author to really refine my book and to make sure that it's what people are expecting when they buy a novel. So I just wanted to say thank you, all three of you, for what you do, because it makes such a big difference. And I'm super excited on seeing what the final version looks like. And I'm going to kick it over to you all now. I assume we're going to go in the same order we did last time. Kristina, Lisa, JoEllen. All right.
Right.
Well, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. And don't let me forget to mention before I go on is to thank you very, very much. FirstEditing is a bronze sponsor of the conference this year, and ProWritingAid is a silver sponsor. And Kristina is a wonderful friend and supporter. And we get so much support from you all for making this happen, and are so grateful to all of you. And I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Alexa Bigwarfe, host of the Women in Publishing Summit. Get my eyes dilated and everything goes insane. But now let's get into it. So Kristina, take it away.
Wow, thank you, Alexa. That was a great introduction. I'm going to jump right in and just start sharing my charts, because we have hang on. Oh, I just got to fix up here. Something didn't work there. Let's try that again. Okay, is everybody seeing story editing? Somebody nod over there. JoEllen nod it.
Yes,
All right.
yes.
Okay, I'll hit my play. All righty, so as Alexa nicely said, I'm Kristina. I am the CEO of Fictionary. I'm just trying to move a bar here so I can get, oops, not that. Are you guys seeing a bar across the middle of this? No, that, okay, good. So that's just the how to manage the screen thingy. So I'm Kristina. I'm a best-selling author. I'm a story editor, and I'm also the creator and co-founder of Fictionary. So for those of you who don't know, Fictionary is software that helps you create fiction faster using AI-based story editing software. So it's a tool that we designed to help both writers and editors just create better stories. And we did it as an enhancement to humans so that it's really helping people get better at what they do. It's in no way intended to be a replacement. I'm not sure that will ever happen for story editing. This is designed for writers who want to self-edit their story. And then story coach we have for editors who want to perform a story coach edit for writers. And so we're trying to help both writers and editors. So that's Fictionary. What I'm going to cover today is what is story editing, when you should be doing that in the process, because obviously we're talking with Lisa about copy editing and JoEllen about professional editing. And one thing all three of us really believe is that editing is a really creative process, just as creative as writing your first draft or any draft. And what our tools are doing are the drudgery bits for you, so you can really focus on using your creative mind to improve your story. And if you do these things, then you're really well prepared to work with a professional editor, which is also super creative, because whether you're doing it in a tool or you're doing it with a professional editor, you're getting suggestions and ideas that will spark things and will get your creative juices flowing. And particularly if you're stuck with a novel and you don't know what to do with it, it gives you ideas. And then you can start rewriting and rewriting and rewriting. We're going to talk about the story elements, and I'm going to give you the top 6 because we're a bit short on time. Normally, I would give a little bit more, but there's 3 of us presenting today, and I'm sorry I'm fidgeting here, but this bar is driving me crazy and I can't seem to find it and get it. See, it's just going to click through. All right, I'm just going to live with it. So the 3 of us, you can see what happens in your writing journey, and it's a process. It's not a straight line. So you write your story, and then the first thing you're going to do is edit your story from a high level perspective. So the structure of your story, and then you'll go on to copy editing, proofreading, professional editor, and publishing. And before you actually hit the publish button, and sometimes even after, if you take your book down and put it back up, you're always writing, story editing, copy editing. It's continual. You go around this circle until you're done. So what story editing is, it's a structural review and a revision of your manuscript.
Kristina, you're not going through your slides.
I'm not?
No, you're still on the first one.
Okay, so it's flipping through on me. I'm going to try and
Start again.
Yeah,
There we go.
Now you
That's
did.
moving.
Good
Yes.
job. Keep going.
That's really interesting because that is now just in my regular. See, now can I go forward? Yeah. Okay. So there we go. So this is what I was talking about when I was talking about the circular thingy of write, edit, copy, edit, proofread, and publish. There we are all together on this lovely graph. So back to story editing. So you're at the level where you're looking at characters, plot, settings, and the story you're telling. So I'm going to give you some concrete ways to look at your story. You can take away and apply today, whether you use Fictionary Storyteller or not. I'll give you something that is going to make your story better. So now the title is a bit misleading here, but I wanted to put this up so you can distinguish between story editing, copy editing, and proofreading, which is not really editing, although it gets lumped in there a lot. So proofreading is after you've really finished your story and all you're doing, you're ready to hit the publish button and you're just looking for consistency in headings and scene break characters and page numbering and headers and footers and italics and all of those things. So at this point, you're not changing a word unless it's a typo. And then of course you can, but, and I just want to tell a quick little story. So I just finished reading Hillary Clinton's and Louise Penny's book, State of Terror, which is fantastic, but very scary. But on page 361 or something, there's a huge proofreading error and a sentence was repeated, the exact sentence. And you think, wow, super highly published book. And my point here is it's okay to make mistakes because even the super professional publishing companies do. And it was in there and everybody missed it. So, you know, don't feel bad when you find that typo in your published book. It happens. It'll make you feel sick to your stomach, but it really shouldn't. It's just a thing that does happen to everybody. And I've given Alexa my slides. So if anybody wants this, they'll get this in the slides. Okay, so when should you story edit? So it's after you have a first draft. And the reason for that is the first thing you're going to do when you do a story edit is you're going to look to see if you have your 5 key scenes in a story arc there. And if you don't have a story yet, and it's not ready for story editing. So you need to know what the inciting incident, plot point, middle, plot point 2, and the climax are. And that's when you can consider you've got a draft written. You want to do it mostly before copy editing, definitely before proofreading. You want to do it before sending to beta readers. And this is important because probably you get one shot at your beta readers. And at the story editing phase, you're still changing the story. So you may have readers who are very early readers, and lots of writers do, that's great. I mean the beta readers who are after you have your story and you're checking that it actually works. And then before sending to a professional editor, and the reason this is important is because you want to give your editor the best possible story to work with, because now you're forcing them to work really hard to improve the story, and they're working on tough issues. So you don't want them to get you to a place where you could already have gotten to. You want them to take you to that next step. And the other advantage is you'll be speaking the same language. You'll know what you need from them, and you'll know how to understand their suggestions. So where to start? So I mentioned this a little bit. So writing your draft takes some people up to a year or more. Editing can take 6 months to a year as well. So don't be too hard on yourself when you figure out, oh, it's a really big job. And so when you're starting, you've got your draft, it's super exciting. The first thing you're going to do is look at your key points, and your story arc may end up looking something like this. And this is one of a manuscript drawn in Fictionary. And you can see that the plot point 2 is coming too early. And by the graph tipping up there, it means between the middle and that plot point, the story is going to feel rushed. And now because it's too early and the climax is too late, you can see the line flattens out a bit. Well, that means it's going to be dragging and the reader's going to get bored. And so these are things that you want to fix before you start doing scene by scene editing. You want to figure out how you can structure your story to get this within the range of the green line. So it's all ranges. There's no set number. And you need to take this and then figure out, does it work for your story? All right. So once you've done that, so you assume you've got your story arc sort of in a good place. And even if it's close, that's fine. You'll go on to evaluating at the scene level. And here you're going to remove scenes, add scenes, change scenes, make them shorter, make them longer. And so the story arc is going to change every time you do this. So the first thing I recommend if you're new, completely new to story editing, is name each scene. And I don't mean name it so it would stay in your manuscript, but name it in as few words as you possibly can. And that means you've got focus to your scene. And you can see on the side here, this is what it looks like within Fictionary for named scenes. Should be enough that you remember what the scene is just by reading that word, and not too much that it's telling you the scene is unfocused. Doing this, it really means you know what the scene is about. So I know here scene 1 is about a funeral. And that's the opening scene of this story. Until I finish my story edit and it's no longer scene 1, there's a different scene, but that's okay. It gives you an after draft outline. So when you're looking for scenes while you're editing, or when you're thinking about moving scenes around, you can see the structure of your story. And quite often the after draft outline is different than the pre-draft outline. And so you'll see what happened while you were writing and got excited with your story and, you know, created all kinds of things. And then it helps define the purpose of the scene. So this is a lead in into the next Fictionary story element. So the purpose of a scene is really defining why each scene is in your novel. So ask yourself, why is each scene in your story? And this is just a little view from Fictionary of a novel with reasons for moving the story forward, build suspense, character development. Also in here will be inciting incident, plot point 1, etc. And if you can't answer this question, the scene might not have a place in your story, and you should be deleting it or rewriting it so it does have a purpose. And if it does have a purpose, then you want to make sure it relates to the overall plot. So it has to be something that is going to drive the protagonist either closer or farther away from the main story goal. And if there's too many purposes, you might think about splitting the scene into 2 scenes or moving some of the stuff to another scene so that the reader gets a really clear view of what you're doing in this scene. Too many scenes too many purposes can cause confusion. Okay, so that brings us on to, so you know what your scenes are about, you know why they're in your book. So who's got the point of view for your scene? And you can write from a single point of view your entire novel, or you can write multiple points of view. Both work great. It's your story to tell. It's one of the artistic choices you need to make. And point of view is really how the reader is experiencing the scene from the view of one character. So their senses, their eyes, their smell, their hearing, their taste, touch, so that everything that comes up in the scene is from that character's perspective. If you don't do that, if you write from multiple perspectives or omniscient and it's all mixed in, it's called head hopping. It jars the reader from the story if it's not done well, and it's really hard to do well. It can cause confusion if it's not done well. To do it well, you need extra words and it slows the spacing. So if you want to do it, practice it, make sure you really know how to do it. So you don't need too many extra words, you're not slowing the pacing. And you'll see lots of examples in very successful books that do change point of view. If you're just starting out, I recommend stay in one point of view per scene and really nail how to stay in one point of view. And then you can move on and change points of view. So what you want to do, so here's the action for point of view, is now you've named every scene, you've listed the purpose of every scene. You want to now list the point of view character for every scene. So you can use this to see, okay, does your protagonist have the most number of point of view scenes? And the answer should be yes. And if it's not, perhaps that's not your protagonist's story. It could be somebody else's story. And you need to think about either how to write more scenes from the protagonist's point of view, or choose a different protagonist. It's only for multiple point of view stories, of course. And the fewer points of view you have, the more time you have to connect a reader. And if there's too many, the story is going to feel unbalanced. Or if your protagonist isn't in often enough, it'll be hard, the reader will lose track. And so you can use all of these by listing it out to see. And this is an example here in Fictionary. I have a story that has way too many points of view and there's really no pattern, plan, control. It was clearly written just from the artist's point of view, and then not thought about in a structured way. Okay, so now you got the name, you got the purpose, you know who the point of view character is. Here is the next most important thing. What is their goal for that scene? And if a character doesn't have a goal, they're not doing anything and the scene is boring. So they must have a goal for the scene. And it can be an external. So what do they want? You know, they want to find a clue. It could be internal. They need to fix some flaw. They might not know what, but they need to. It must be related to the plot. So it can't be a random goal if I got to pick up my car from the auto shop, if it's not related to the story. And it must have consequences. So what happens if the goal fails? Doesn't mean the goal has to fail, but if it did, there has to be consequences, because if there aren't, what that means is there's no tension. And this is a good way to check if there's tension in the story is, what's the goal? If it fails, what could happen to that character? And then the reader will worry about the character because it might fail. So here's what can go wrong. There's no goal, or there's too many goals. And so the reader doesn't know which one to cheer for, and it dilutes the main one. It's inconsistent with the character's personality. So would your character actually have that goal? Have no consequences, which I said. And if it's achieved too easily, and that means that they have a goal, they get it, they win it. They have a goal, they get it, they win it. They have a goal, they get it, they win it. And that's dull too. So you want to have goals that are hard to get. They don't need to be reached. One could be set at the very beginning of the story and not reached to the climax or the resolution. It could be the next scene. It could be the same scene. So it's going to be dependent on the goal. Okay, so I'm just going to go very quickly on setting. I'm going to give you my favorite story element for setting, and it's emotional impact. And what's that? The question there is the location chosen the best place for emotional impact? And so if you think of two people arguing and, you know, they're just out in a parking lot somewhere, each person could walk away. Okay, but what if you put them on a chairlift and the chairlift breaks down? They can't go anywhere. So now there's more tension in the scene because you chose a place to give that scene tension, and the people can't get away from each other, so they're stuck. And the very last thing I'll talk about is tension. And it's different from conflict. So tension is the expectation of something bad is going to happen. And conflict is the thing actually happening. So it's the argument, it's the fight. The tension is leading up to it. And it only works if the readers care about the character. And that comes back to not having too many point of view characters, so the reader has time to connect with the character. So we did scene name, we did the scene purpose, the point of view character, the point of view goal. And then I just forgot what we did, the emotional impact and tension. And so once you've done all that, now here's what happens. So if you go through even 6 of the story elements, you're going to change your story quite a bit. And so the story arc that I showed at the beginning is perhaps what your story arc looks like then. And the goal is a story arc that looks something like this. And in Fictionary, every time you update your story, the story arc redraws. And so you can see the impact you're having on the story arc for the structure of the story as you're developing your story and doing your revisions. And so this is the main goal at the end. So you started high level structure, scene by scene, high level structure. And you'll notice I didn't talk about anything at the word or the paragraph level, because that comes into the copy editing. So if you've said what you want to say, but maybe it's not the best way to say it, when you're copy editing, you'd attack that paragraph and do your copy editing on it to make the prose really shine. So these are the ones we covered. So there are 38 Fictionary story elements, and we covered scene name, the purpose of a scene, the point of view character, their goal, tension, and the emotional impact. So if you take these and go through every scene in your novel after you've done your story arc, and then back to the story arc, your story will definitely be better. This is what it looks like in Fictionary. So it's laid out that your scene is on the left side and all of the story elements are on the right, and they're broken down into character, plot, and setting. And they're either a drop-down menu, choose something, click a button, or fill in your own text, depending on what you want. And there's a notes panel, so you can make notes as you go. Lots of writers like to read it and have thoughts, but don't want to actually deal with them. So you can stick it in the notes and keep your thoughts beside each scene. These are all the elements. So I thought if you're getting the charts, you'll have a full layout of all of the elements with a description of the elements. I know you can't read the little bits. I just wanted to let you know this is in here if you want to reference it. Okay, so just to end up on our side, this is just a little testimonial we have from one of our writers. And so what she's saying is, now having jumped into using Storyteller, I strongly recommend writers start with Storyteller. Only pure joy will result. A Storyteller enables you to shave years off the learning process. Have fun, free writing, absolutely. But Storyteller provides a path of least resistance to get your title page, to get from your title page, point A to point B to the end. And I liked this one because I wanted to bring it right back to the beginning, where we talk about story editing should be fun and creative. And if you can remove the drudgery parts, it really, really is. And the other thing I liked about this is that within Storyteller, for each of the story elements, we have writing advice. So it's right there for you when you need it. And that's what she's talking about with the learning process. So we have a discount for everybody here. So you can do a 14-day free trial on Fictionary.co. The coupon code is WPS25 for 25% off. You sign up for your free trial first. There won't be a place to put the coupon code in then. You just sign up, decide during your free trial if you want to subscribe or not, and then you can put your coupon code in. So hopefully I didn't go over my time. I'm going to end on story editing and pass it over to Lisa for copy editing.
Okay, great. Thank you. So I mean, I love Fictionary. I think it is so great at helping you think of all the things that you didn't think of when you were writing. Because when you're writing, you have a picture in your head and you're trying to paint a picture for your reader. And then Kristina comes along in her software and says, hey, did you think about how the weather might contribute to the atmosphere of this scene? Hey, did you think about how this person might be that? Hey, have you noticed that actually the mother is playing a way bigger role than you thought she would? And maybe you need to either tone her down or make her your protagonist. And I just think there's so many things that she can bring to light and help you think about within the context of actually your writing. So it's really different in that instead of reading a book about how to write a great novel, you've got feedback that's specifically related to what you're writing at this second within the scene that you're writing on. I just think it's really incredibly useful. And like Kristina said, we always do it in this order because Kristina's looking at the big picture of things, and not Kristina, Fictionary. Kristina's not going to be in all of your houses reading them all. But what Fictionary does is looks at that big picture. It helps you tell the story. It's all that creative side. And then once you've got all of that in place, and it's important to do that first because those are your big building blocks, then it's really important to go down to sentence level, word level, because all of those sentences work together to create paragraphs, which work together to create chapters, which work together to create a great story. And so copy editing is about a lot of small changes that add up to a really big thing. And so if you haven't done your story edit first, and you spend tons of time fixing up all of your writing on that more technical level, and then you do your story edit and you have to cut a whole scene that you've spent 2 days perfecting, it's really hard to do that. Nobody wants to cut their scenes that they've just spent loads of time doing. So my advice is that you look and make sure all of those big rocks are in place before you even think about that sort of sentence level editing. And then like Fictionary, ProWritingAid is there to help point out, the things that you may not have thought of. I'm just going to share my screen now so we can start on this. So Jodi Picoult said it really nicely when she said you can always edit a bad page and you can't edit a blank page. And I know lots of you here today probably love the writing process and find the editing process really scary. Or some of you find the writing process really scary and love the editing process. And when we talk to people in the ProWritingAid community at some of our events, we find it's sort of 50-50. There's people who find that like getting it all out process really painful and a real struggle, but love going back and fixing things and finding the gems and figuring out ways to make it shine. But other people love that whole creative process and then find it all scary. So we're here to help you love that whole process. That initial story editing process and this sentence level process. So, okay, so copy editing is about more than just grammar and spelling. What I'm going to focus on in the next few minutes isn't spelling and isn't grammar, because you all know that spelling and grammar, you need to get it right. What I'm going to talk about in the next little while is those things that are about copy editing, and they're not about fixing grammar mistakes. They're about improving the readability of your writing. And so if you think about it, writing is essentially just getting an idea that's in your head, getting it out using the magic of words and getting it into the head of your reader. And the more you can smooth that process, the less that the reader has to guess or fill in the blanks, the better. They're going to understand what you're trying to say without misinterpreting things, misunderstanding things, without any missing pieces. I also just want to say, don't irk the submissions team, because if you're trying to get a traditional publisher, or even if you're just, trying to find readers through self-publishing, there's some really basic things that really bug the submissions team. And if you think that they read all day, every day, these are some of the really amateur errors that mark you out as amateur. And so even if it sort of works, it's always worth having a look at some of these things. So these are the 5 that I'm going to look at today, but it's definitely not the end of the kinds of things that you can have highlighted within ProWritingAid, but it I wanted to give you a sense of the kinds of things that ProWritingAid can highlight that will make a big difference. So we're just going to look quickly. We're going to move fast at passive voice, over-reliance on adverbs, nominalization, dialogue tags, and cliches. And it's not just me. George Orwell said, never use the passive voice when you can use the active. So what is passive voice? Passive voice simply is that you have put the doer of your action at the end. You've put the object, the thing that's being done to it, at the beginning of your sentence, and the doer of the object at the end. So in this case, math was taught by Miss Jones. So Miss Jones is one that's doing the things. And the doer of the action is always more interesting. If you think of the movie that's playing in your reader's head, like the word math or that computer or anything static isn't nearly as interesting as Miss Jones, who's actually doing something. So it's this turning around your sentences so that your doer of your action is right at the beginning. Here's another example. The crime scene was being monitored by local police officers versus local police officers were monitoring the crime scene. It says the same thing. Neither one is grammatically incorrect, but it's one of those small bits and pieces that over the course of your manuscript or your nonfiction book or your story or your article, that is just going to make your reader take that much longer to have the movie playing in their head. And all of these little things add up. Here's one more example. The book had been borrowed by Kate versus Kate borrowed the book. It's fewer words, it's more concise, it paints a cleaner picture in the mind of your reader. Insulin was discovered by Frederick Banting versus Frederick Banting discovered insulin. And so in ProWritingAid, it'll flag all of your sentences that are written in passive voice. Sometimes passive voice is okay, and you need to learn the difference. And within ProWritingAid, we'll flag it. And if you're not sure what passive voice is, how you should fix it, what is problematic, there's a little orange button in there that's your information button. And it'll take you to articles and videos and all kinds of things to help you learn. So passive voice is okay if you don't know who did it. The bank was robbed on Tuesday. We don't know who did it. If the doer of the action doesn't matter. So the Empire State Building was completed like by tons of people. We don't need a whole list of who did it. So it's not really irrelevant. The important thing is the Empire State Building. If your focus is on the object rather than the subject, so in this sentence, pesticides were discovered in 80% of supermarket flies by researchers at NYU. So your focus in this sentence is the pesticides. That's the interesting bit, more so than the research, who did that discovery. And then there's the way politicians use it, where they want to be, deliberately vague about who did it. And they just say mistakes were made and they don't want to say who did it. They're trying to get out of that. So generally, passive voice is potentially problematic and always worth having a look at to see if you can improve your sentence. Second thing that is a real red flag for the submissions team is overuse of adverbs. And again, adverbs aren't wrong in themselves, but they're problematic when you overuse them. Stephen King hates them. He's well known for his dislike of adverbs. He doesn't love adjectives either, if I'm honest. So this is, I'm going to give you an example of a problematic adverb. So here, he went to Sharon's house. You want it, that's a pretty boring sentence. You want to add a bit more fire, make it a bit more interesting for your reader. They say he went quickly to Sharon's house. But actually what you're doing there is just modifying what's essentially a really boring verb. And verbs are like the powerhouses of your writing. That's where all the interest happens. And so you've taken a really boring verb and tried to add a bit of fire with an adverb. What you could have done is say he sprinted, he raced, he bolted, he jogged. All of those are more powerful. All of those paint a better picture in your reader's mind. They give your writing more power, more impact. And as much as possible, you need to keep an eye on adverbs that are adding, that is an attempt to add power to something that is inherently boring. Find a better way to do it. And often you don't even need to add the adverb, because if you have good context and good writing, you don't need it. So if you think about Kate looked at Tom, how did she look at Tom? Kate looked lovingly at Tom, she beamed at Tom, or she looked furiously at Tom. A better way to say that is she glared at Tom, right? In that case, beamed, it works better than looked lovingly. In this case, glared works better than looked furiously. Ooh, bad capitalization there. I apologize for that. Third, nominalization. This is another way that people hide their verbs. And if you take nothing else away from this, it's that you need to free the verbs. So here's an example of what I see all the time and what you will see all the time too now. People are constantly turning a really great verb like decide into a noun and saying, we will make a decision about the winner on Tuesday, compared to we will decide the winner on Tuesday. And this happens all the time, especially when people are doing work writing and trying to sound a bit more formal. I've got a couple of other examples. Yeah. So you'll see this. They undertook an analysis. They analyzed. They carried out a review. They reviewed it. They gave an explanation. They explained it. Just use the verb. Just say it. Free your verbs. So all of these sorts of things will be highlighted within ProWritingAid. And again, it's not a grammar mistake. This is just a clarity issue. It's a way of using the fewest, most concise words to get your ideas across. Oh, dialogue tags. I love this quote. So if dialogue is so weak that the writer has to explain what emotions are being conveyed, then there may be some much more serious problems lurking. And I think that's right. So dialogue tags are when you say, hang on, I think I've got some examples here. Yeah, so Amy says, well, she exclaimed, I'm telling mom. So she exclaimed it there. Sometimes people also add an adverb on there, which is like, you're in double trouble. The better way to say it is to say, Amy stopped in her tracks. She turned to Mason, her eyes blazing. I'm telling mom. You don't need to say she exclaimed it, because you can tell by the action around it, by the description, by what she's doing, that she is exclaiming angrily. So then you can just leave it right off. But this is a way to make your readers feel it instead of reading the word and intellectualize it. It's just more powerful. And then lastly, cliches. So George Orwell said, never use a metaphor, simile, or other figure of speech which you are used to seeing in print. And I've got a couple of examples here. All of you have seen all of these sentences before, right? And writers, when they're starting out, love to drop these in because it's sort of a cheat sheet. You know, you write, he read between the lines, and your reader knows what you're saying and can fill in a bit more information. But do you know what else is important about words that they've read a million times before is that they're instantly forgettable. And so finding a new way to get your idea across related to something else that's happening in the world, you know, you could say she felt like a fish out of water, or you could create a new way of getting that feeling across, like saying she felt like walking into her first high school dance. or when she showed up at her first ever meeting to present to the board. You know, those feelings that you can convey that everyone knows, but that aren't cliches that everyone has read a million times. And so we've got a list of, it's long now, there's like 600 cliches or something within ProWritingAid, that if you use them, we'll just highlight them and say, look, this, you can do better than this. Go back, have a think about it. When you're writing, when you're in creative mode, like chuck the cliches in there. That's fine. It's a really good way to do it like a bookmark. Because it's really hard to come up with good symbolism. It's really hard to come up with a good way to paint imagery in your reader's mind. So drop them in there. But when you go back and do the edit, like take some time and find a really effective metaphor that's really going to create a big impact on your reader. I think that's the end of where I'm going. Oh yeah, Terry Pratchett said the first draft is just you telling yourself the story. And do you know what? I've put this up here that we've got this discount for the for everybody who's doing the conference this week. But I think actually I've got that wrong, and it is a 50% off discount. So I'm just going to go and have a quick look, and I'll drop it in the chat before we go. Okay. Oh, I love reading all of these chats about everybody who feels just as passionate as I do about all of these things. Okay, and from here, I'm going to pass over to JoEllen, because, you know, one of the things that Kristina and I hear a lot is that Fictionary and ProWritingAid are going to take the place of a human. And we're like, yes, we're not going to take the place of a human. We're about helping you get the most out of your human, out of your professional editor. And the more you can clean up your work and put the time and energy into making it as good as it can be, the more JoEllen and her team and people like her will be able to really shine it up and make it incredible. So JoEllen, over to you.
Ooh, thank you. Okay, well, we've talked about copy editing and story editing, and now we'd like to talk about professional editors and where we fit in this navigation of your editing and your stories. And it's basically a journey, and we've done an ebook there together, and I've sent that, and that'll be included, so you all have that. And what I want to talk about is the different types of editors and the different type of editing, because, you know, the great thing is when you're using these tools, you become more knowledgeable and more aware of what you need and what your challenges are. And so when you're speaking with an editor, if you're using Fictionary, then you know what we're referring to. If you're using ProWritingAid, then you're familiar with what are some of your challenges. You can run some of the reports, and both of these tools are things that we use at FirstEditing. And just to kind of tie it all together, I mean, Kristina has certified all of our editors at FirstEditing. So we're the first certified structural editors doing all the story coaching there available for you. And what that means is that we're using the same system in the background, which means if you love to do it, we're on the same page. But if you're one of those people who gets, fed up, we can take over at any point and help you through that. But the great thing is, if you are a do-it-yourselfer and you are really adamant, then you will finish that first stage of editing and then come to us ready for a line edit. And that's really ideal. And the same point when you're using the copy editing, the more coherent your story is, the stronger it is that we can read. We're not stuck on commas and punctuation and those smaller things. The higher level of edit we can go back into and look at anything that may be missing. And that just comes from, looking at it so long that you're not catching all of the inconsistencies or the small little factors that could be strengthened, as both Kristina and Lisa mentioned. That'll make your story stronger. And the other thing that I want to mention before I start all this is that we're talking about story editing today, but actually at FirstEditing, we also do nonfiction. And I've seen a lot of comments here from nonfiction writers. So that's really, really great that you can use both ProWritingAid and a professional editor, and we can help you on any of those. So I'm going to speak from the perspective of story editing, but just be aware that when we're talking about that structural editing, that is also available for nonfiction. So let me share my screen and I will try to go. All right. da. All right, good, excellent. So basically we're talking about how the professional editors, and it's all about confidence. Sometimes editors, especially people who use all these tools, I can say that you're really good writers. You know, and that's great when you come to us, that, but you still have this worries, and you want the second opinion, you want it evaluated, you want it critiqued. And that's what professional editors do. We go through it and we confirm all of your successes, while also pointing out some of the smaller things that can be tweaked and strengthened as we go through. So we're going to help you through that. And there are basically 4 stages of editing, and there's an extra blog post that was connected to a self-editing school I did with ProWritingAid, so you can come on and read that a little bit more. We'll include the link. And then there's also loads of information that Kristina and I have done with videos. So why is it important to edit professionally? And that I mean, obviously you need to do this, but it's going to ensure that quality, so that when you go to print, you don't have that second sentence that's repeated. We hope to God that it doesn't exist there. And that's what it's all about, ensuring the quality. And when you're going to the submission teams and you're talking to them, that you have something that isn't thrown away. You know, it used to be the slush pile and it just disappeared forever. You really want to make sure you get through the front door, because it's not easy. As we're speaking, there's millions of people typing at their desks, and these are all people fighting to get the same attention as you. So, and the important part that an editor contributes that sometimes is more difficult for the writer is how to keep your readers engaged, because we're asking you, what is your promise to your reader? What are you providing here? How do we keep them engaged in your message, if it's a nonfiction, or your characters? How do you care about them? How do you root for them? How do you do this? Oh, that's interesting. Now, okay. My slides are taking off on their own. So anyhow, there's 4 stages of editing, and we'll just briefly go through those. The structural editing that you see through Fictionary, they do the storyteller, so you can do a lot of that yourself. But as I mentioned, if you feel frustrated or need help, then we have certified story coaches who go in and use that system. And the great part about combining those is that you have both an experienced editor who's an expert in your genre, who's also, so they're looking at it from those subjective points of view, but they're being very objective by using these tools that make sure nothing is overlooked. Then we have line editing, which of course is, you know, after that, making sure that we're going consistently through and not overlooking and everything. And quite often, if you've done good copy editing, the line editing will wrap a lot of that up, but you always want a final copy edit. And proofreading, which is not really the editing stage, but it is necessary once you go into formatting. So that comes after the fact. There's a spiral. Here we are. Oh, why is this? Is it just delayed, I think?
What I see is, there we go. They're moving now.
Ah, okay. I'm looking at the wrong screen. Gotcha. So 4 stages of editing: structural, line, copy, and the proofreading. So now I use the right buttons. Great. So there's how it works. Each stage is not sequential. It's not something that you do and then you're done. Quite often, for example, if you're doing structural editing, when you remove a scene or you add a new scene, then you're going to go back and have to do other adjustments here and there. So it really is a cha-cha. It's 1 step forward, 2 steps back. It's just the way we do it in editing, and it's lovely. It's not something to be feared. It's the process. So accept the process and you'll be okay. So let's just start at the highest level, which is again looking at the overall structure of your manuscript and figuring out what's going on there. So it's story editing if we're doing fiction, it's substantive editing if you're doing a nonfiction, and that means we're looking at it from the point of getting your message across to the right authors in the right way, or the right readers in the right way. So structural editing is in-depth, is comprehensive. You'll hear it quite often referred to as content, developmental, substantive, but structural is where we're moving around, replacing, and making sure that it flows. So we're aiming towards that story arc. And of course, the editor is looking at your story arc. And if you're unable to locate those 5 key scenes, then your editor is going to be able to go in there and say, this is the one that needs to be developed. This is how you should be doing it. This will help you get to that next level. So again, it's as much or as little help as you need and want. So they're going to review in detail all of that. And they're doing this again when you're out and you're hiring a professional editor. And that's what I'm speaking from that perspective today, is you need to really find somebody who is trained and has experience, has success in their background, who can show you what they do and how they do it. So that helps achieve all of that. They're going to apply this method, and why we combined with Fictionary was to be objective, to use the AI. And the same way we also use ProWritingAid, we're making sure that as humans, we're not overlooking anything. So you're using our expertise in conjunction with that, the tools there. And they're going to look at it both subjectively and objectively. So again, here is your story arc and how you're trying to achieve that. So it's very, very important as a fiction writer. So they're going to look at your story arc, all these wonderful things that Kristina mentioned, and they're going to go through that. And if you want to learn more, if you really are a do-it-yourselfer and you want to get in there, we have done 38 story elements video series. And I encourage you to read and watch and involve yourself as much as you can, as much as you want to do that. So, because it only makes you, the more you edit, the better you will write. And even though they are separate portions that should be completed separately, they do strengthen. So it's like the bicep and the tricep. They're really helping counterbalance one another. So we're going to convey your character's vision and empathy, again, making sure that your readers are engaged and that they're specializing in your genre, and that they're going to evaluate it from those 38 fictionary story elements that they talk about. And then, of course, you're not going to look over anything because they're going to use that software and training. And so they're preparing you to come back and revise. Now, the editor will give you advice on what you've done well. They'll give you advice on what you need to work on, and they're going to show you how and where to do it specifically. That's what we try to do. And we also give you a professional summary letter so that you can go through and you can see that. And the great thing is in Fictionary, they're laying, it is actually embedded with the notes. It's embedded with those scene by scene. So instead of cross-referencing, which was the previous way of doing that, if you had an Excel sheet or whatever, you would have to come back and see that. The great part is, technology allows us now to just lay that side by side, and it does it all for you. And that makes it much, much easier to understand what the editor is saying and why they're telling you to do it. And you've got all this syntax, rules, and regulations back there backing them up. So can you do the structural editing yourself? Yeah. We do a lot of this. I'm doing the self-editing school with ProWritingAid. So we're talking about copy editing, we're talking about line editing, we're talking about structural editing. You can use the 38 story elements. You can restructure your story from the start to the finish. You're going to write a blurb. You're going to do all of this. And again, if you're using Storyteller, then it's there, or you can even get certified to be a story coach. So you're putting all of those elements together to work, and the editor is trained and certified. So if this has been new to you, that's okay. You have somebody who is an expert in that and can walk you through it. The good thing is next time on your next book, it's going to get faster and easier and faster and easier. And really, these tools are for the committed editors who are working through that. So skip over this a little bit, but we've made sure that all of our editors are certified there. And as I mentioned, we're going to send, no, this isn't the book we're going to send you the ebook that ProWritingAid and Fictionary and I wrote together to help you through that. What happens is those people who've used Fictionary successfully quite often have done a really good job of structurally editing, and then they're prepared for the line edit. And the line edit is basically going over the tone, the style, and the consistency, and is ensuring that everything is working towards not just your plot line, but towards the mood, towards, as Lisa was explaining, how you say it, how you use your verbs to their advantage, and you keep it all going along there. It's very important that your tone and your style is all consistent and that your artistic voice remains strong there. Oh my goodness, I just see that time is slipping away. So you want to get the line editor. They're going to go through all this. You do have these handouts available, and this is the different levels. And if you don't understand what level of editing you need, then of course you can always ask for a free sample, and they're going to tell you what you need, and they'll evaluate your document, they'll determine what you need, and everything will base upon that evaluation. So, and they're going to set a timeline and deliver that. So you need to find out what you need first before you just hire an editor. You may have an idea, but make sure you confirm that with the professional editor before you get started. And then of course, your final edit is that copy edit, the professional copy edit, which is when they're going through those final review and making sure that it's all up to date and it's all ready for formatting before you go into that. So, and I'm going to keep wrapping this up because you're going to get these handouts, and I'm sure we have some questions in the next 7 minutes. So the final copy edits, you can do that working with ProWritingAid, run a report, and make sure that happens. And the good part is if you're using ProWritingAid, there's a button in there and you can click on it and you can come to us, and we will definitely validate where you are in the editing process and let you know what you need. So there are 4 levels. They're there. I encourage you to stop by, read the rest. We'll send all this along on the way, and wrap up your proofreading is, again, that's after the formatting in case the way it lays out in the structure doesn't work right. So we'll send you the ebook. Can we take questions now?
Yes.
Oh, and there's a 20% discount. Sorry. And that's WIP 20 at First Editing, good until the 23rd, because by then you guys are all checking out for Christmas anyhow.
Awesome. If you don't mind stopping your share, we'll pull everybody back up here again together and answer these questions. I just want to make sure everybody knows a couple of things. So let me take off these glasses. Woo, right. So a couple of things. We are still in early bird pricing for the Women in Publishing Summit. So the conference will run the first week of March, the 2nd through the 5th, and we'll have these ladies back. We'll have a 101 with ProWritingAid on their tool, and time to ask JoEllen questions about their editors, their editing process, time to ask ProWritingAid, all of the things. So go on over to womeninpublishingsummit.com and grab your ticket there. There will also be discounts for conference attendees. That's a part of that as well. So let's see, I'll let Lisa answer that question in a minute, but we're just going to go through the questions in the Q&A box if anyone has anything. And I just want to say, like, this was such valuable information. And if you came in after I shared my story at the beginning, I'm not going to share the whole story again, but what I can tell you is that there's so much more than I ever imagined to writing a book. And I've been reading a lot too. And now I read books in my genre and I really study how they are put together, and comparing how some of these other books that I'm reading with what I wrote as a first-time novelist. I mean, there was a huge difference, and I was overwhelmed with thinking, how do I get from what I wrote in my draft to what's here? And when I went to Fictionary and started going through those questions and thinking about the things, I realized that there is a formula, there is a way to develop that writing, and then taking it over to ProWritingAid, like Lisa said, where it identified, I'm the queen of cliches. So I was just laughing out loud when you were saying that, because I was like, it's probably just going to turn my whole document red, like, and then, you know, having that live person partner who can walk through it with you and say, because AI can't get everything, there's no replacement for that person to walk through and help you as you refine it and move forward. So all of these, I use all of these tools. We just sent I have a publishing house called Cat Biggie Press. We just sent one of our authors through First Editing, and we're so pleased with the whole process. We send people over there all the time and get great reviews from them. So anyway, now let's answer some questions here on the thing. So I don't know how, do you want me to just read them out to you and we can do it that way, or? Okay, so Rainey wants to know, Kristina, is Fictionary something one might use to edit a memoir, or is it primarily created for fiction?
Yeah, sure. So we do have people who write memoirs editing in Fictionary. It depends on how your story is told. And if it's told as creative nonfiction, so you're actually telling a story throughout your memoir, then yes, absolutely. If it's a factual, this happened, this happened, this happened story, then it's not so helpful, because it doesn't need a story arc and all of the character information. So it just really depends on how close you are to creative nonfiction versus nonfiction, which is a bit of a vague answer, but you can try a 2-week free trial and see if it works for your particular manuscript.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay, Selena says, I'm writing a story that changes voice on alternate chapters between two characters. Is that a more appropriate for shifting, a more appropriate way for shifting?
You can do it that way. Absolutely. If you look at Gone Girl, it's Nick, Amy, Nick, Amy, Nick, Amy, and it's a complete pattern all the way through. And what you'll notice is it's consistent. So it flips the same way. So when you're doing it, you can do it. You can organize it per chapter. You can organize it per scene. If your scenes were themed to a certain thing, you want those points of view together, put them in a chapter. If they're not, it makes more sense, keep it separate. And then just at the end, look at how you've used the point of view and were you consistent? Did you do 2 or 3 scenes in one and 2 or 3 in the next? Or are you going 1, 1, 1, 1? But once you have a pattern, stick to it, because if you break it, it's going to jar the reader out of the story.
Perfect. If you write in Fictionary, does it allow you to save it as a doc? It's a docx.
Yeah, if you can export your manuscript to a docx, and you can also export the notes per scene to a docx file.
Perfect. And you can edit right in there, which I found very useful because I could keep looking at the questions and the things and all that kind of stuff, which was helpful. If you're starting for the first time with Fictionary Storyteller, is there any prep work to do to your manuscript before you upload it to help the software know where your plot points are, your inciting incident, etc.? What should you do before you upload to get the most out of the software?
Right. So that to get the most out of the software, the most important thing to do is start each word with the word chapter and use a unique scene break character between scenes if you have multiple scenes in a chapter. So a tilde, 3 stars, common characters, but not ones used in the manuscript. So not a question mark or an exclamation mark, that sort of thing. And then Fictionary uses those as triggers to structure your manuscript into chapters and scenes and draw your word count per scene. And then it has a whole bunch of formulas behind it to draw the story arc from that information on how your story has been organized.
Perfect. Okay. Elaine says, I've had 3 different answers on how to use ellipses. Would ProWritingAid give me a consistent answer?
I mean, an ellipsis is a tricky one. I feel like there's, JoEllen, you may be better able to answer the specifics of using an ellipsis, but I feel like it's one of those bits of punctuation that seems to be morphing and people use it in different ways, especially you see it a lot on social media and that sort of thing. And I think use the ellipsis in the way that makes sense in your writing. A lot of people use it for a little pause between what they're trying to say. JoEllen, correct me if I'm wrong. You're the editor here.
Well, again, the great thing about the English language is constantly moving. And as you said, it's different types of style. So if you're writing copy and you're using it in, emails, it's totally different from, say, if you're using it in dialogue from when you're writing a description. So you really need to be aware of that. And without knowing how they're using it and seeing what it's being used with, that's one of those particular things. So of course, you can pop in for free with ProWritingAid and they'll show you what they can. But if you want to know for sure, you can always send it over to us and we'll do a free sample and see what we can help you with. But how often are you using it? That's also another thing. If you're having a real ellipsis problem, then you're probably using it in a very specific way again and again.
And potentially too much. I think it's one of those things that it's good to use occasionally, but don't overdo it.
All right. Well, I was about to answer this one, but I wanted to make sure I was correct on this. For Fictionary, there are video demonstrations that help you on the different places, on all the features. That I can't remember if there was one on. Yeah, there's a video for each section.
There's a video for each section. There's a video behind each story element that shows you how to use the story element. And then on our webpage, if you click support, there's the video tutorials, or if you look under our resources in the top menu, there's video tutorials. So you can pick different areas, or you can do it as you're using the app. It's totally, it depends on how you like to work.
Perfect. Does Fictionary work in tandem with Scrivener?
Not in tandem. You need to compile and export from Scrivener, and Scrivener has a beautiful feature that says put the word chapter and put scene break characters in. So it formats perfectly to import into Fictionary.
Perfect. Okay, does Fictionary help when you are flipping between past and present in your manuscript? My story is second chance romance where the couple is reconnecting, and a lot of it's in the past and then goes forward. Once they reconcile, the remainder of the book is in the present.
Right. So there you would use the date and time story element under settings to keep track of the time zone that each particular scene or chapter is in. And then you can use the story map to see the whole thing together, showing you how much time you've spent in the present and the past.
Perfect. I love this question because we've used ProWritingAid to do this before for our anthologies, but the official answer from Lisa: how can you use ProWritingAid to edit other books, other authors' books? After using ProWritingAid, then put it back in Microsoft for them to do what they want to correct? Is this possible?
So what I'd recommend, if you're using Microsoft Word, there's a download that you can add into your Microsoft Word. It's called just an add-in that you can add ProWritingAid right to your Microsoft Word toolbar. So if you install that, and then you can go through the changes, and if you turn on track changes, then you'll be able to send that to whoever the author is. So you could go through, make all the changes, and then like using all of ProWritingAid's suggestions, and then afterwards they can go through and hit accept or reject on all of the changes that you've made. How did you do it, Alexa?
So we did it two ways. I used the tool on Word on my computer, but since with our anthologies, they were one chapter at a time, I like the web editor, maybe because that's where I started. So anyway, so I would just do a chapter at a time in the web editor, then export them and send them their Word document with the changes.
Did they see the changes, or you just send them the updated version?
That's a good question. I don't remember. The last one we did was 3 years ago. Maybe Nancy remembers. I'm sure they had track changes on them, but I don't remember if it was exported from ProWritingAid or not. Sorry, I guess I'm not helpful on that question after all.
Okay.
But you can use it in Word, and then you can track change and they can see all the changes.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, all right. I think that's all the questions that were in the question box. So I just want to remind all of you, first of all, if you didn't see the coupon code, if you missed it, if you're still thinking about it, don't worry. We will send out the replay, and in the email it will have the link to the ebook, all 3 of the coupon codes and their links, and just watch the deadlines, because I think one ends on the 13th, one ends on the 23rd, and I think ProWritingAid is for 1 week as well.
Yeah, I've got yeah.
But you can come back during the conference, and we will be also offering discounts with our sponsors during the conference as well. So let's get editing. Thank you all so very much for this really, really insightful webinar. And would you like to say anything else before we end it?
Just thanks for all the great questions. It's always really fun to answer them.
All right.
And don't be
Yeah, thank
afraid
you.
of editing. Editing is exciting. It's where the magic happens. Like
That's right.
that's where almost all what I interview authors quite a bit for the events and stuff that we do. And almost all the authors say that the best bits, the ones that people talk about, are things that they came up with when they went back and really put time into certain sections. Like just embrace it, find it. That's where there's so much joy in it.
It's so much fun. All right. Thanks, everyone. And we'll send out all their information in the email. All right. Have a great day.
Bye. Bye.